Thank you. Thank you, Holly. Okay, moving right along. Sorry. Now we have Margaret Stevens. Margaret is a historian who teaches at Essex County College in Newark, New Jersey, where she was also raised and educated. Her research focuses on the relationship between the Communist International and the anti-racist struggle in the Caribbean between World War I and World War II. She is also a veteran of the U.S. Army National Guard and has experience organizing veterans in the anti-war movement. She's a member of Veterans for Peace Board and a good friend of mine. Here we have Margaret Stevens.
So I really appreciate the time I've spent with Veterans for Peace over the past year. I've been really lucky to participate at the level of the board for Veterans for Peace. And over the past year, I think that Veterans for Peace has really begun to feel the commitment of what's involved with what we're talking about is, people call it war at home, war abroad, but we decided we'll call it peace at home, peace abroad, because we're proactive and we're for peace. So we're at the point where what we're really trying to think about is how the veterans movement through Vets for Peace can really help the entire anti-war movement be a true coalition of those folks who are engaged in fighting racism and fighting unemployment and fighting, the takeover of the school system and fighting police brutality and incarceration, what we call domestically, with the people of those of us who tend to fight drones in Afghanistan and those of us who tend to fight occupations in Eastern Europe and in Africa and Latin America. So in other words, connecting the dots. And as Mr. McPherson always says, you're not connecting the dots are connected. We just have to show the fact that they're connected. So that's the point. We're not actually connecting the dots, but it's important because this is the point that we're at this point in history. Because part of the way that racism works, it works on so many levels. And one of the ways that it works is that it keeps, and I see both sides because I'm a veteran and I was part of the anti-war movement, but I'm also a proud Newarker from Newark, New Jersey, and I'm also about fighting for my community and my people. And it's almost kind of like you're told to choose. Like either you're about fighting police brutality and fighting the killings that we're doing one another in the streets, and you're about fighting for better jobs at the local level at the Board of Ed, or you're about fighting against racist unemployment and the fact that all the factories started leaving years ago and now the black folks in Newark are left with nothing. So either that's your struggle or your struggle is against Agent Orange and the pollution and what people have been suffering in Viet Nam. So the peace folks are over here and the anti-war people are over here, but the people who are against fighting the racist oppression and unemployment and super exploitation and sexism, women on welfare are over here. So you got one struggle over here and then one struggle over here, and choose your side. And I think that that's part of the legacy of the movement that we have to break. And when folks like Martin Luther King started breaking that, he got assassinated, right? So King got assassinated when he was at a labor protest in Memphis or something like that, right? Like he was with the sanitation workers or something. So he got killed when he was making connections between Viet Nam and the struggle and the plight and unionization of, black workers in the South. And so we have to pick up where the best of our leaders left off. Right? And we're at the point where we have to throw out a lot of the bad and we got to create new good. And you all in here, for me, are a reflection of so much of the greatness of the history of the fight to create a better world. And we carry with us the wounds that comes from that and the trauma that comes from that, but we carry the courage that comes with that. I always tell, people ask, well, what are you doing? And I just disappear for the weekends and I'm in North Carolina or I'm somewhere, and people are like, where are you at? And I'm like, I'm with the modern day version of the Underground Railroad. That's where I'm at. I'm with the people who are the equivalent of what it was like when the Quakers helped store people in their basements who were escaping from slavery. And that's how I see many of the people in this room who are part of the anti-war movement. It's that level of commitment to the fight for freedom, for humans of all kinds. And I think that, so some of the things that we need to really just put more frontally on the table is that, okay, some of you might be pro-American, you might be about bettering this country, but I'm just about humanity. I don't stop, my borders don't stop with this country. So when we say peace at home, peace abroad, for me, my home is anywhere in the world where people are struggling. And it's so funny. It's so funny because when I've been in Africa, when I've been in the Caribbean, when I've been anywhere in the world, and I say this, especially when I say this to black people, they're like, but you're American. Like, Americans don't think that way. They can't be about everyone because you're American. And I'm like, wow, we have a lot of work to do in this country. So I think that's one of the things we really got to put on the table. If you're about freedom for every human on the planet, which means there's no borders to that. And if you really believe in those borders, you got a problem. You're stuck. You're stuck in the old way. And you really got to get past that. And that's one of the things I really think we need to think about. The other thing we need to think about is that if we're serious about freedom, we got to be okay with women running things. Like, women... We gotta be okay with that, because either way, whether we accept it or not, they already do. Like, the women already cook the food the majority of the time. They already made sure the flyers got printed. They already made sure the layout of the magazines was correct. Already in the history of the fight for emancipation of humans, women's role is erased. It's erased, but it's fundamental to every aspect of the struggle that we were ever to look at. So these are several of the things that I think we have to think about. And so if we can really be truly anti-sexist and truly about inclusion of men and women, and if we can truly be about looking at humans across all borders, and then we can do things like in Newark, New Jersey, where I'm from, every time a young black or Latino kid gets killed, whether it's by the cops or by one another, Vets for Peace is out there with a flag to memorialize the life of that young person who's died at the hands of another young person. And the fight, they're fighting over blocks. They're fighting over blocks because that's all they have is that block. They don't have anything else besides that block. So everything they've ever known is on that block. So they fight for it like it's all they've ever had, even if they grew up renting. So that's why they fight and die for that block, because the guns are flooded onto that block and the drugs are flooded onto that block, and they're told to fight for that block. So what happens on the block is just a microcosm of what happens overseas. And until we learn that the struggles we fight for and die for are the struggles these young people are killing each other for, until they understand that they're mimicking the same behavior of the Pentagon, but they're mimicking it and killing one another, and they're not even benefiting financially, until we help them understand that, our movement won't grow and our movement won't sustain itself. So the future of this movement is the future of the peace at home and the peace abroad. It's the future of really, truly believing in a borderless fight for emancipation for all people towards a peaceful world where women play a critical role in that process, because we already play a critical role in keeping humanity alive. So we have to find a place for that in the fight that we're defending. And I think those are the key points that I could really make in 7 or 8 minutes, and let the ambassador come on up. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Margaret. I'd like to begin our next section, just a reminder about the date, that the reason that we picked today, and granted it's not exactly April 30th, but on April 30th, 1975, it's Reunification Day in Vietnam. It was the victory of the Vietnamese, of the People's Army of Vietnam and the National Liberation Front of South Vietnam that won the war. I want to make sure we remember that when we talk about this full disclosure. We helped, we participated, and we demonstrated. The Vietnamese won that conflict. I'd like to recognize 2 people who were part of the Vietnam Roots delegation to Vietnam. I know you're here. Could you stand up, and thank you so much? Tammy and Trang Nguyen, you just went back to Vietnam. Thank you. And please bear with me. I can't continue to talk about Vietnam without reminding you all about the legislation on Agent Orange. HR 2519, the cards are in the back of the auditorium. We're talking about former American military and the Vietnamese and Vietnamese Americans working together to heal the wounds of war, to provide services for the children, for the people in Vietnam who have been so severely impacted, to provide services for the children of American male veterans who served in Vietnam, and to clean up the Agent Orange dioxin that continues to contaminate the land in South and Central Vietnam. Please get an orange card and sign it, or I promise you I will haunt you at the next meeting and the next conference. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Ambassador Lee Hoi Trung, who is the ambassador from Vietnam to the United Nations. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here with you tonight. And as you have been talking about peace and against war, we think that it is very important. It is important because of what happened in the 1960s and 1970s. Many of you who are here may still recall it was a very sad chapter between the two peoples. We have so many things in common. You were also fighting for your independence in the past. And Vietnam, we were also fighting for our independence and the right to have a nation and to have our right to self-determination. And some of you may still recall there were some pretexts used in the late 1950s and the 60s, early 60s. It was about to fight communism. It was about contain certain other forces. It was about the domino theory. It was about freedom. And at the end of the war in the 1670s, many people concluded that it was wrong to fight the war in Vietnam. So it was the history, but you look at the figures here, you see that many died for those mistakes. Many died for those mistakes. I was born in 1961, so I was a teenager. I was born in Hanoi and I grew up in North Vietnam. And you may recall that in the beginning, the fighting took place mainly in South Vietnam. Then it was extended to North Vietnam with a lot of bombing, including the use of B-52. You may recall B-52 is a kind of strategic bomber. The mandate is for a conflict, a possible conflict then between the US and the former Soviet Union. But it was used in Vietnam, and in 1972, for example, it was used against the targets in downtown Hanoi, the capital. So you could imagine if a B-52 fly over Manhattan and drop the bombs on Manhattan, you could see the destruction over there. You cannot say that it's like collateral damage. You cannot say that there are military targets over there, so there are some side effects, because it's a city, it's a civilian city, and you use B-52. B-52, some Air Force people are here So so it is used carpet bombing, meaning that it would be several miles wide. The bomb would be dropped. It would be a carpet several miles wide and would run several miles long. So it would destroy many things there. And also about the Agent Orange. The Agent Orange, now some people might, because some people have died and some people, their relatives may get on with their lives. But for those that have been affected with the Agent Orange, then it's not only the children of those that took part in the war or were affected directly during the war, but many generations later, and we don't know yet. Even now, we don't know yet. In Vietnam, they say several million people are affected. When you visit a house that, for example, and normally for those families are families of veterans. So sometimes that's the desire of the father or the mother to have another second child. Maybe it may not happen to the second child, but it happened again. So the second child is not normal. So they try to have another child, the third child, the same problem. So with that, they get into even more difficulties and they become even poorer and poorer. So many consequences are still there. I was there and I grew up during that period. We had to go to the countryside. I often said that it was for me as a young boy, a teenager then, for me, when the weather is nice, it's not good for us. We wanted to see like very foggy, very dark days, because you know when the weather is nice, airplanes can come. Airplanes can come, and if you go for children like us, then rarely you can see the white shirts, because with the white shirt from above they can see more easily those with white shirts. So very simple things for that generation. So I think that that is very clear about the consequences of war. But at the same time, when we were there during the war, we knew that there were many American people that were opposed to the war. They were opposed to the war because the war brought about destruction to the American people themselves. And many American people were also convinced that it was not right to fight over there. And now, if you look at all the records, it's not written by a leftist organization or written by Vietnam, written by even the Pentagon itself. And many of them, they have, it is clear that they shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be fighting the war over there. But when we were there, we knew that there were American people. There were other people throughout the world that were for peace, that were against justice. And it did give strength to the Vietnamese people and other people like the Vietnamese people. So I think that what you do here would create some strength. In the beginning, you know, when they said that the Vietnamese, North Vietnamese attacked, when President Lyndon Johnson said North Vietnam attacked the US Navy in the Tonkin Gulf. That is why they had the Tonkin Gulf resolution. Many Americans didn't know about that. Many were supporting the war, etc. But then from one group, small group, larger group, one group, and then two groups, three groups, four groups, and it became an anti-war movement. And that anti-movement did help end the war in Vietnam. And the tragedy not only for the Vietnamese, but also for the American people. So I'd like to take this opportunity to stress that what you do here is very important. is very important. It was very important. It was effective. It was. It could be dozens of people. It could be 3 people. But gradually, it became a force that could help deter a war and promote peace. That is about the experience of war in Vietnam. But nowadays, you see that there are still people that wants to use war. I'm working at the UN, and sometimes I sit in the conference room and I listen to a number of people, scholars, some from people from different, from different organizations, and they talk easily about humanitarian intervention. There might be, I accept that there might be different views about humanitarian intervention, whether it should be so or etc. But it most likely it would lead to war. It would lead to war. And those people don't know much about war. War is very cruel. War is very, very destructive. And for a war to kill one person is terrible enough. So now, especially nowadays, you know more than you know very well that you can be very, very far away, and you just push some buttons, and even you have some special instruments that fly. You don't see it, fly somewhere and kill. You don't know. So we think that it is important because nowadays there are still people, not only here in the US, but there are still people that still want to use war to advance the interests of some groups, to settle the differences among groups, among nations. For example, differences among ethnic groups, differences among religious groups, they still want to use war. So I think that what you do nowadays is very important, very important. And from our own experience, if we do not have peace and stability, we cannot have anything else. So you talk about poverty, you talk about health, you talk about religion, you talk about many other things. But if we do not have peace, you cannot have those things. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you, all of you, for those that were involved in the peace movement, in the anti-war movement, and for the Vietnamese, and also for the righteousness of the American people in the 60s, 70s. We would like to thank you for that. And many of you from different organizations and also the veteran organizations have come back to Vietnam. They have come in different ways. They just come and share with us what they think, what they thought about the war in Vietnam. And last year, our president, Trương Trấn Sang, was here. And there was a very good meeting between Vietnamese veterans and American veterans that fought during the war. The two sides, the Vietnamese and the Americans, they talked about how the war was taking place in Vietnam. A number of American veterans was expressing their sorrow and their guilt, but the Vietnamese soldiers, they were talking about what they are doing now to contribute to the life in Vietnam. And they wanted to reach out to ask the American veterans to help them to find, for example, those that are missing in Vietnam. We have several 100,000 missing in action in Vietnam. They haven't been accounted for. But for most American missing in action, they have been accounted for. And the American veteran organizations, the U.S. government have said that they appreciate the sincere efforts on the part of the Vietnamese government people. We have been trying to do our best. But so we'd like to thank you for that. Some of them have come back, for example, like Susan and many other people, to deal with also the consequences of war. If you look at the map of Vietnam, and that's the map that was given to us by the American military about the sites that ammunitions and bombs were dropped on Vietnam. Then you see it is dark. The entire map of Vietnam is dark. It means that there are many unexploded things over there. So they have come back to help. Also about the Agent Orange, they have come back to help. So we thank you for all of that. And secondly, we would like to thank you for your kind support for the promotion of understanding between the two peoples nowadays, to promote the relations between the two countries. Because there are still certain people that want to stick to the past, still want to incite the hatred. They don't want to get to a new future. So please, when they see them, please tell them that we may have differences, but don't repeat the mistakes. Try to have mutual understanding. We may have differences, but we should promote the understanding. We made the mistakes before. Don't make the mistakes nowadays. And at the same time, especially we thank you. For me, I thank you for the time that you have been spending to fight for things that are right, to fight for peace. It is a difficult cause. The matter is that sometimes forces that want to promote war have more resources than those that want to promote peace. So what you are doing now is very important. And for me, for us, for the Vietnamese, we always understand that we are human beings. There is a big difference between the American people and those that wanted to use war and wanted to use force. Even it is the case now. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you, and also thank you for your kind attention, and wish you all the best, and also wish the greater and the better relations and understanding between our two peoples. We, the Vietnamese, we very much appreciate the spirit, the creativity, and also all the endeavors of the American people. I thank you very much again for your kind attention.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, Kevin Augustine. Our next presentation is by Doug Rawlings, who is one of the founders of Veterans for Peace and a poet, and he's going to read a couple of his poems. So if you'll just stay with us for a little while longer, thank you. Doug?
Can you hear me? I served in Vietnam in 1969 and 70, and I'd just like to say to the ambassador, for what it's worth, sorry. First of all, a public service announcement, emergency exit. In case of an emergency, that is a war, or that is the preparation for war, or that is life in 21st century North America. Do not use the legislative process. Take the streets. Here's a little math quiz for you. A bicentennial poem, autumn 1976. My daughter is 2 now, and she almost can talk in complete sentences. Why, if this were 7 years ago, and she Vietnamese, she would almost be old enough to sell her mother. That's a side of war that a lot of us don't talk about, that young people don't hear about. What we not only do to our fellow combatants, but what we do to the people who are caught up in our horrible, horrible wars. So I get out of Nam and I head eventually to central Maine, where I've lived for the last 40 years. And sometime in the early 80s, I don't know how I found out about this, but I might have been still getting my militant newspaper in my rural free delivery. But I heard that they were going to build a memorial to this Vietnam War, to my war. It pissed me off. So I wrote this poem, and the we in this poem are the Vietnam veterans who realized the immoral stupidity of that war. On war memorials, corporate America, be forewarned. We are your karma. We are your Orion rising in the night sky. We are the scorpion in your jackboot. Corporate America, be forewarned. We will not buy your bloody parades anymore. We refuse your worthless praise. We spit on your war memorials. Corporate America, be forewarned. We will not feed you our bodies, our minds, our children anymore. Corporate America, be forewarned. If we have our way, and we will, the real war memorials will rise from your ashes. So as Susan said, we formed Veterans for Peace in 1985. 6 of us in Maine. How long ago that was. Our first field trip, we took to Washington, D.C. We chartered a bus. We went down there to support the new members of Veterans for Peace who were starting a 40-day-only fast to protest our wars in Central America. And I have to tell you, I've taught for years and years and years, and I would tell my students that we misuse the word hero a great deal. But a hero in my mind is Charlie Litke, who was a chaplain in Vietnam, who won the Congressional Medal of Honor, the highest award you can give to somebody in a war zone. Okay, that makes him somewhat heroic. What makes him really heroic in my eyes, he's the only person in the history of the United States to turn in his Congressional Medal of Honor. And he did that in protest of what we were doing in El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, etc. A real hero. So we go down to Washington and do our thing. And then as a side trip, we head over to the memorial, to the wall, the thing that I detested before I saw it. And I have to tell you, the other hero in my pantheon of heroes is Maya Lin for designing that memorial to the Vietnam War. I think it's the most touching experience you can have in Washington, D.C. And I went with Jerry Genesio, who's really the godfather of Veterans for Peace. We went to the wall. His brother's name is on that wall. Coming back from that experience on the bus, I wrote this poem entitled The Wall. Descending into this declivity dug into our nation's capital by the cloven hoof of yet another one of our country's tropical wars, slipping past the names of those whose wounds refused to heal, slipping past the panel where my name would have been, could have been, perhaps should have been, down to the wall's greatest depth where the beginning meets the end, I kneel. Staring through my own reflection beyond the names of those who died so young, knowing now that the wall has finally found me. 58,000 yard stairs affixed on me as if I were their pole star, as if I could guide their mute testimony back into the world, as if I could connect all the dots in the nighttime sky, as if I could tell them the reason why. My last poem is a poem I wrote for my son, Josh, when he was turning 13. He and his buddies, and I gave him a choice. I said, I'll buy you a dirt bike or I'll write you a poem. So, yeah, of course you know what he chose, right? He said, yeah, the poem, Dad, the poem, right? Yeah, right. This is for my son and all of your sons. If Nam vets were ancient shamans, now would be the moment we choose to give you shelter from the coming storm. But we are merely survivors, suburbs and cities, not forest nor mountain. Modern men offering you our silence as our words to guide you going out on your own. Yet we have known for years now that the silences of our fathers will not do. And we have found that words alone cannot be the sacred knives you need to bleed you free of your raging doubts. So listen up to what we have found between our own silences. Open up your fists, watch women move, scorn uniforms, don't march, dance. Thank you.
I just wanted to say about Doug Rollins, for me personally, the fact that Veterans for Peace exist is so very important for me, because when I was looking for a place to go in the anti-war movement, I had decided to start working for peace because I had come to the conclusion that all the different isms, racism, sexism, homophobia, classism, all those things, the umbrella to solve those problems is to work for peace. So it was before 9/11. But then 9/11 happened, and I was looking around. I didn't really feel at home in the other organizations. And then I found, through David Klein, I found Veterans for Peace. But there would not have been a Veterans for Peace if Doug and the other people hadn't started it. So when you talk about heroes, and you're right, people use that loosely. But I consider you a hero. I consider the founders a hero. And there are a few times someone can do something as important as creating this organization. And here we are, all these years later, it's still here. And I don't think it's going to go anywhere, unfortunately, until we do our job, which is to end war. And we will do that at some point. So thank you, Doug. So next, Patrick McCann. He's the current president of Veterans for Peace. Patrick joined the U.S. Air Force in 1970. 4 days prior to turning 18, he volunteered for Viet Nam, where his father and brother were serving. Patrick met the Black Panthers in Chicago and turned against the war. Opposition to the war led to stockade time, a bus to E1, and an undesirable discharge. Patrick is currently a high school English teacher in Rockville, Maryland, and on the board of MCA, an 11,000 member of the Teachers Union. Patrick has been a union member for 30 years and 21 years a teacher, and I've known Patrick quite a long time. So thank you.
So let me give another big up to Doug here. We're working on our convention. It's our 29th annual convention in Asheville, North Carolina. We have some folks here from the Asheville committee, the host committee. Thank you very much. Big ups. So we just booked Cynthia McKinney as our keynote speaker. But prior to that time, we were running around. I was like, oh, we need like a Alice Walker like we had in Miami 3 years ago. And Doug said, look, don't worry about it. Let's make this a gathering of the tribe. So when Doug said that, that kind of got me focused more towards trying to make sure that we can bring forward a larger number of global war on terror veterans. And we're going to have a plenary panel. Maggie Martin from IVAW, Mike Preisner from March Forward going to lead a plenary panel on the voices of global war on terror veterans' voices. We're also going to have a workshop on this, full disclosure, another one on Agent Orange. So that's a little pitch, July 23rd to 27th in Asheville, North Carolina. So Margaret talked about moving, I call it moving beyond the choir. You know, she was talking about race and gender. I teach high school, and I teach 130. 100 of them are youth of color. They're 16 and 17 years old. So they were the inspiration for the two poems that I want to do here today. I have a young man named Teddy Thelonious who wants to be a Marine. All of his brothers are Marines, and they've been to Iraq, and he wants to be bad too. So I wrote this poem for Teddy, but the poem is about Thomas Young. So it's called War Haiku. As you know, the haikus, Japanese 3 lines. Well, I got 13 of them running a string. So it's War Haiku Medley. True story. It's about Thomas Young, Kansas City. My man Thomas was just walking around chilling, just got out of school. He didn't know where he was going or even what he was doing. 9/11 came along. He wasn't working. He joined the army. He went to Iraq, was riding in a Humvee, rode over a bomb. Thomas was flown back on a medevac plane back to the world, yeah. Then he got married. In Miami years ago, she and I did talk. She told me that she married him after he lost both of his legs. After a short time, they divorced, perhaps because he had much anger. He's married again, haven't met his second wife, but he's soon to die. Takes about 30 different pills every day. I've talked with his mom. I know Thomas Young. Met him back in Miami in 2005. He was a GI. He lives in Kansas City. A little while longer. Help keep him alive. Thomas Young is his real name. Please remember him. The other poem is in my English 10 and 11 classes, we did some literature circles on war. And of course, Mr. McCann got to pick the stories. So we had some great anti-war discussion, with 130 teenagers, 16, 17. Some of the same kids that probably a couple of dozen of them will be in the military 5 years from now. So this is actually from my younger sister who caught a elbow to the temple, had a brain injury when she was 16. She's now 48, and she's just getting ready to have her first job in her life. So this is her extended metaphor as a mental health veteran. My mental health tour of duty. I was not born a soldier. I was drafted. I trained in survival. I have lived in war zones. I am equipped with armor. I am loyal to my troops. I have lost most battles. I wear no medals. I have been tortured. I have been captured. I know solitary confinement. I dream of peacetime. I found an ally. I work on new strategies. I wish to disengage. I need backup. I would like to rebuild. I fear annihilation. I want to be a civilian. I am stuck a veteran. I hate fatigues. I have flashbacks. I forgive the enemy. I feel like a refugee. I despise the camps. I am not disabled. I want no arms. I need no supplies. Do not demote me. I want a promotion. Do not play taps. Stop the fighting. Protest for peace. Be disorderly. Do not pull rank. Build no monuments. Create no holiday. Help me out of the bunker.
So now we are at the open mic session, and we have Tarek Koff, a current board member of Veterans for Peace, super activist, buddy friend of mine. Take it away.
We're going to get into open mic. So now is your time to speak. And you've been very patient, and you've been a great audience. I think I have a few people lined up that want to speak. I'm going to start with, you raise your hands, but I'm going to start with, a World War II vet, Jay Wank, who is World War II vet. I'm just going to ask everybody to keep it brief so we all get a chance. Jay is a World War II decorated infantry veteran. And I'm just asking everybody to keep it a little bit brief because we're kind of running out of time and we want to hear Rebel Diaz. So thank you. Go ahead, Jay.
Hello. I'm really honored to be here, and particularly to be a witness, to watch this drama unfold that was going on the side of the stage reminded me, and I think it's appropriate, to paraphrase Abraham Lincoln's words in Gettysburg when he said, "The world may not remember what is said here, but they cannot forget what was done here." And what was done here is the most important thing that I've witnessed in a long time. Tarek said that I'm a World War II veteran. That's true. I carried a rifle across Belgium and Germany and into Czechoslovakia. I helped to open up 3 concentration camps: Buchenwald, Dachau, Flossenburg. And you may wonder why I'm up here. What do I have to do with this event tonight about Vietnam? Hell, I'm one of the chosen. I'm one of the wonderful troops. I'm from the war that, what did they call us? The last just war and the greatest generation? That's bullshit. That's bullshit. My war, you need to know this. It's very important that you know this. Those phrases are PR from the government. My war, World War II, could have been avoided. A lot of people don't know that. That's why they talk about the greatest generation and the last just war. I won't go through the history that leads us to understand that World War II could have been avoided, but I'll just mention 3 things you can all check out. The Treaty of Versailles, the march into the Rhineland by the Germans, and America declaring neutrality along with Britain and France with the Spanish Civil War. That brought us World War II. So, I've written a number of poems about the war, which I'm not going to read. They tend to be titillating to a public that's basically not, well, I shouldn't say what this is called The Cost of War 101. Open your notebooks. Today's lesson begins with the chapter devoted to liberals who applaud heroes of resistance, and though they really don't have more time right now, will stand for a while on individual molehills of lassitude, politely whining about politicos who should be in prison for sending those fine young people to kill and be killed. They forward emails, sign petitions, donate, deplore, demand, but the proclamations they sign avoid action. And above all, they abhor the streets where danger tests the heart. They're not hungry enough for the hardtack of peace, not strong enough to stand with the bloody, not smart enough to know that talk is cheap. All the above allow war and are its cost. Your homework is to get these people energized. And this is Wounded Knee. Neither on the prairie or at the table were ghost dances welcome. Starved, they showed the white flag, but the cavalry charged. Bloodthirsty soldiers cracked the icy dawn. Women and children ran, huddled under frozen stream banks in dry ravines. No hiding places there from government's teeth. New dawn brings photographs. Warm men and horses fill the wintry 1890 background of contorted frozen bodies scattered like dry leaves. Frozen ground, burial ground, sacred ground, ground for sale. At $5 million, it's a steal from the Miniconju Lakota, whose abode was there as long as grass grew and rain fell, living with nature's truths, cycling birth and bones into the brown earth gift from Wakantanka. In Pine Ridge, they lived with conscience. Slave owner Thomas Jefferson despised them, laying it out in the white man's Declaration of Independence. Deceitful Sherman of war's hell talk had no interest in conversation. Golden-haired Custer, intent on glory, became an empty hero as defending Crazy Horse cut him down. Surrendering, Crazy Horse is murdered. The guns of 1890 have a razor-edged bottom line. Sharper still are myths, books of history, vulgar assignment of tribal names to rivers, counties, towns, states, road signs, casting away the truths of these ones. Spotted elk never sang and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Wounded knee still bleeds. And I'll finish up with this little one. How to kick the American opiate. I will not pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America or to the police state for which it stands, under surveillance of a psychopathic God, without liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Before the next speaker, I just want to thank the young people who came out tonight. Let's have a hand for the young people. Thank you for coming out. Next person who asked to speak is Bill Gilson. I want to, we're running a little short of time, and we want people to hear Rebel Diaz. They came all the way to play for us. So I'm just going to ask everybody to keep it short. Bill, you want to come up? I got you, Bob.
I would like to read a statement made by General David Monroe Shoup, Commandant of the United States Marine Corps, 1960 to 63, winner of the Medal of Honor, in a speech delivered at Pierce College in the Los Angeles area on May 14, 1966, as quoted in a book about him entitled A Warrior Against War by Howard Jablon. I believe that if we had and would keep our dirty, bloody, dollar-soaked fingers out of the business of these nations so full of depressed, exploited people, they will arrive at a solution of their own. And if, unfortunately, their revolution must be of the violent type because the haves refuse to share with the have-nots by any peaceful method, at least what they get will be their own and not the American style, which they don't want, and above all, don't want crammed down their throats by Americans. With this speech, Shoup closed ranks with a growing number of other military leaders who opposed the American war in Vietnam, including Army Generals Matthew Ridgway, James Gavin, and Robert L. Hughes, Marine Generals Hugh Hester, Samuel H. Griffith, Rear Admiral Arnold True, and Marine Colonels William Carson and James Donovan. As Howard Zinn puts it, the more clearly we see the past, the more clearly we will see the present and be equipped to improve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Again, let's keep it brief. Bob is going to speak, but I want to encourage any women that want to speak or young people to raise their hand. But Bob, come on up. I don't hear you raising your hand.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bob Carpenter. I'm a U.S. Army veteran, 1960 to 66, and active duty first 2 years. I just want to make a comment. I just want to make a comment that I want to give a little addition to what was said tonight. I think everything that was said tonight was on target. But I have a comment. When I got out of the service in 1962, I was basically anti-war because I hated weapons. And the military put a liberal kid to hate weapons. And the civil rights movement was there, and there was music, and the peace movement and the Viet Nam War was starting up. In turn, the civil rights movement led me to the anti-war movement. And I want to say that I, in the early stages of a 23-year-old youngster, now I'm 73, 23-year-old youngster, got involved with SNCC and got involved with a group called Veterans and Reservists to End the War in Vietnam. That was in 1964. It was not the in thing to do. All I want to say is I want to give great credit for education to the pacifist organizations like War Resisters League, New York Workshop in Nonviolence, the Catholic Worker, who educated me, and I learned nonviolence, and I learned that there was another answer to war. And I have to say one other thing which has not been said tonight. The young people, especially starting off in, I don't remember the month, but in 1964, when David Miller, Tom Cornell, David McReynolds, and I'm probably missing a couple other names, burnt their draft cards in Union Square. That was the start of something happening. And in turn, other people burnt draft cards, and it started out here in the streets. Not only did they burn draft cards, I, as a reservist, turned in my draft card. And I had you-know-who on my back the next week. But the point that I'm trying to say is there were all kinds of seeds out there, as Pete Seeger would have said, all kinds of seeds that led to 1969 with the tremendous March on Washington. But believe me, people, and a lot of you know it, in 1964, it was not the in thing. And groups like, who I disagree with, Youth Against War and Fascism, who I'm not on my favorite plate, but they were out in the street. They were out in the street. And you've got to give them credit for that. And that's all I want to say. That is the truth. And I just had to get that off my chest and keep fighting. And we have to tell the truth about what the Vietnam was totally about, here at home and over there. Thank you.
All right. You know, Rebel Diaz is ready to go on. Bill, if you can keep it to 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Okay, Bill Perry.
I'd like to speak on what Jeff Cohen was speaking on earlier. I was a participant in a 1971 Winter Soldier investigation in Detroit. There were about 101 of us who actually testified. 29 of us had actual combat experience. I testified about atrocities, about asphyxiating children, about targeted assassinations of a woman holding on to me. There was no excuse to kill her. There were a lot of different things, but things that really affected me. And in addition to abuse of corpse, some of the things that the GIs did to corpses. This couldn't be covered by the mainstream media. But what Jeff Cohen was speaking about, the media turned around and we booed them on the way out. They went across the street and stood in the slush and shot footage of the counter-protesters, the right-wingers who were against us. That was the extent of the coverage of Winter Soldier investigation 1971. Fortunately, I had a shot at the George Meany School in 2008 with the Iraq veterans and Afghanistan veterans when they did their Winter Soldier. I helped put it together. I served a part of that. I'm 100% post-traumatic stress. It takes a lot of things to get to 100%, but I'm actually glad that I experienced those things, and I've been able to educate myself. And I worked with some of the early people on post-traumatic stress in the 70s and early 80s before we could get the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual to okay it. And one of the big things back then was to portray the typical post-traumatic stress person as relatively pathetic and scared of noises, shaking, and experiencing what they call suicidal ideation. The big secret that nobody covers is homicidal ideation. An awful lot of us who have post-traumatic stress, especially postmen in the 70s, had homicidal ideation. They went out and killed 6, 8, 10 people at a time in about 14 different post offices nationally over a 4-year stretch. This was buried. Nobody talked about it. It was hidden. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And especially those of us who had it, because we didn't want to ruin it for the guys who only had suicidal ideation. There's a lot of really shaky things going on out there. I'm available for help veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, all eras, all wars actually, to get evaluations, treatment, and monetary compensation for the money they lose from what the government put us through. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I wish we had more time for the speak out, but I want to give some time to Rebel Diaz. They've come. They're a great group. They do great work. They perform at SOA Watch every year. They got great stories to tell. They got great music. They got great lyrics. So I'd like everybody to move up a little bit, and come on. Yeah, you can. Okay.
What we're going to do right here is go back. What's up, y'all? What's up? What's up? I want to need y'all to rock with me. We are real happy to be with y'all here today. We just came back from Philadelphia, where they are celebrating the 60th birthday of a comrade that's behind bars by the name of Jamal. For those that don't know, Munir Jamal, former Black Panther journalist, wrongfully accused of killing a police officer in Philadelphia more than 30 years today. He's still in jail. Now, Munir has told us that he doesn't want to just talk about Munir, he wants to talk about mass incarceration and the slow genocide that is happening in our black and brown communities, in our poor communities, where people that do not fit into the global economy are being pushed into prisons. So today, we're going to turn the tables on the system and call the system guilty. We're going to take the system to court. The capitalist system of America, guilty. The FBI, guilty. CIA, guilty. Homeland Security, and neighborhood police. They stole 3 forts of Mexico in 1848, abducted African
Indians and then sold them as slaves. Genocide against the native infidel. Give thanks. Wrote their history books and made themselves great. There's two types of crime. Power and survival. Crimes that deal with power are the ones you might not find, dude. Look at the trillions that were stolen from the Wall Street bailout. And Maria's still stuck in the jailhouse. They sick. They killed little Ayanna Jones. She was 7 years old, man. The story gets old. Look at the war. Look at colonialism. Look at the trade agreements and the profits from their prisons. We know the aggressor. They trained him in Georgia at the School of the Americas, where they teach torture. My father's a survivor. He talks about it often. Thousands disappeared, no funeral or coffin. And I can't harm them without the charge of terrorism. But they the terrorists, man. I charge the whole system. From the filthy politician to the lying professor. Guilty as charged, we convict these oppressors. We plead our case, they guilty. To the crooks stole the book, they guilty. The court of the people, we deem them guilty. Pay their debt to society, return what they were robbing. We plead our case, they guilty. To the crooks stole the book, they guilty. The court of the people, we deem them guilty. Pay their debt to society, return what they were robbing. They all guilty as charged. No immunity clause, no impunity, no. Put them behind bars. Get them all. The killer cops, the gentrifiers on the block, the CIA, black ops. Undercover, overseas and on your corner, at the border. Big brother trying to control us. Hold up. They say it's guilty profiling. They say it's racialism. They say it's capitalism. That is imperialism. We plead our case, they guilty. To the crooks stole the book, they guilty. The court of the people, we deem them guilty. Pay their debt to society, return what they even robbed. Peace, shots, we lit. Too many people that are facing foreclosure, privatizing schools, endless wars. For too many people, this so-called American dream is an American nightmare, y'all. Come on, now put your hands up, hey, hey. Now put your hands up, hey. Now put your hands up, hey, yeah. As long as you're playing for the other team, the hood ain't living the American dream. The wine never scared, so we get prepared. Say now we ain't stuck in this nightmare. Yo, these rappers made it rain, so my flight's delayed. So I look for sunny days to get in my own lane. See, life takes a toll, so I live the freeway. Waiting for the wrong team, you should just request a trade. Come on, what if King James like Muhammad Ali? Okay, what if Jay-Z talked about getting free? Instead of more weed, how we need more green, so we plant more trees on these concrete streets. Please don't leave when you get that. Be back at the cheese, so we ain't making no money. See, I stay on the run like return delivery. Oh, won't you help me if it includes misery? No bunch of days, secret, it's not a mystery. I'm a head of my town, so the prison misses me. But the story will be different in the history. Ain't get a Tupac, would have never set foot in places. And long as you're playing for the other team, the hood ain't living the American dream. The one never scared, so we get prepared. Say now we are stuck in this nightmare. Ain't no news, I see ya. Schools on school ya, cops wanna shoot ya. So what you gonna do about it? Next game, you'll shut up, or get hit now. I'm gonna pull your pillow. So what you gonna do about it? First day and nights, make me feel nice. Like I'm working on according to what I have. You'll never see evil guys. I system that balance a lot. I'll get harder. Drop on the dollars, not got a ride. Separated, want to gain more power. More than the power of your, cause it's not alone and the Yoruba. It's a price on peace. I'll price to get a piece. All slice of that pie, make your peace. Grabs in the bucket and some shoot in the bucket. And then sharing the bucket. And you ain't about nothing. Everything we heard, you wanna hear. By making more shit, you're just playing pretend. And when you hit that concrete cylinder, but after making money, you don't see my vision. As long as you're playing for the other team, the hood ain't living the American dream. You ain't